From Clyde Golden, I'm Tim Yaden, and this is Input Doc. It's the podcast where we explore what marketers need and what agencies provide.
Wow, you look so professional with that microphone and feels a little more formal than I was ready for.
Do you feel under-teched versus underdressed?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm both right now.
Yeah.
That's COVID life.
So you have a little bit of time?
Yeah, I've got a good hour for you.
Okay.
I listened to the first episode. It was great.
Good.
Yeah, I think you're onto something here. It's kind of nice hearing from people in kind of the same field, but with like such different experiences.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and we'll give that a shot.
All right.
So here we go. Michael Ryan Wilson is the brand creative director at Finish Line in Boulder, Colorado, a national retailer of athletic shoes and apparel. Michael started off as a designer, but I always think of you as a content creator because you can write, design, and you have a great strategic mind. We've worked together a couple of times now.
Yeah.
And so just for people listening, they should know that you're not just somebody I've never met before. I've actually known you probably for about 10 years.
Yeah, maybe a little more. Yeah, 10 years. It might be actually 10 years.
At least that. And we worked at an email marketing agency first, Responses.
Yes, the great Responses, yeah.
And then you've assisted here at Clyde Golden a number of times as a design director.
Absolutely, yep.
It's really helpful to be able to chat with you now and again and ask you, well, what would Michael Ryan Wilson do? And then you tell me, and everything works out.
Yeah, that's a great introduction and kind of a great brief history of the stuff we've done together. And it's always good to, I guess, collaborate with the people that you know, not just the work that comes out, but just like how each other work physically, mentally, emotionally. So, I mean,
There's a pool of people who I worked with over the years who I miss greatly just because I enjoyed working with them. And you always want to find a chance to go work with your people, And it's and you're one of those people. And one reason why I wanted to ask you to be on this podcast is that there's a handful of people who I call repeatedly and ask for advice, and you're one of them. And usually we talk about acquisition strategy. I wrote down a couple of these things we talked about recently. Acquisition strategy, guerrilla marketing, remote content creation, working with influencers, and then I would say, but consistently we talk about NBA basketball, which hasn't really changed in the last 10 years. And
no.
Yeah. And
the players have changed, but the conversation hasn't.
It's the same chatter.
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of cool because you're interview number 8, which is a number that means something to you.
Yeah. That's Kobe's number. That's,
And you're holding up your most recent tattoo. Is that correct?
No, this is an old one. I mean, that's a number 8 that I got for Kobe when I was in Italy, but I did the 24 recently.
All right. So you got the 24 across the chest.
Yeah. For everyone listening, there's 24 that's just across my neck. So, I'm happy to be number 8. That's awesome.
And then I named my dog Clyde after Clyde Drexler. And so in turn, I suppose the agency is like a grandchild of Clyde Drexler, former Trailblazer.
Yeah. I can't wait for him to come and see your new place and check about a bottle of champagne on the door.
I'm sure he'll stop by sometime.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what you're up to and what your current role is. And you're the brand creative director at Finish Line. And so you've worked both on the agency side and in-house. And I'm curious about your current responsibilities and what you're working on.
Yeah. So, I joined Finish Line about a year ago to the date of today. So it's my anniversary coming up. And I was brought in, we got acquired by JD Sports, which is a large athletic sports fashion retailer in the UK. They came over to the States and thought they were just going to flip the stores over to all JD, but then realized that the kind of the marketing and consumer strategy was different in the United States than it was in the UK. So it wasn't going to be kind of a one-to-one type strategy. And, I was brought over to really build the JD sports brand, which is more focused in fashion and I guess a more elegant retail than a Finish Line, which is a shoe store. But Finish Line's doing great right now. So JD's kind of caught in this business situation of like, they don't want to try to fix something that isn't broken. So now we have two brands under our belts, and those two brands, JD and Finish Line, coexist, but also do not cannibalize themselves from both creative and marketing perspective.
It's an interesting philosophical question. If you have like a department or an arm of a business that isn't in your long-term plans, but is doing amazing.
Yeah.
Do you shut it down and refocus, or do you ride it,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that was the danger of kind of the business that I'm in right now is making sure that we keep the moneymaker afloat, but don't cannibalize that business with, I guess, just trying to bring a logo and a name that no one is familiar with.
What are the differences in the primary audiences between JD and Finish Line?
Yeah, so Finish Line is definitely it started in athletic specialty, and as I think the culture grew, it became very influenced by hip hop culture, very much by like NBA and streetwear. So when you think about footwear, and I can talk about footwear all day, but you think about Finish Line, it's you get your Jordan retro drops, and you get the Yeezys, and you get like hot releases. And on the JD side, for the US consumer, it's very much this global player aspect of, I guess, fashion influence. So while there's a lot of crossover in the product, it's worn differently, and hence it's marketed and creatively expressed differently in the brand image. So targeting, I guess the big difference is, targeting people that need validation is Finish Line. So we use a lot of influencer content, a lot of celebrity and musician and sports athletes on that side. And for JD, it's much more about I'm the validator. The consumer is very much I'm going to buy this because I like it and not because I see other people wearing.
Interesting. I haven't really ever listened to or heard audiences broken down into I need validation versus I am the validator.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that goes with the whole kind of influencer culture, right? So you can look at brands that heavily use influencers, and that is very much like the validating factor. It's I want this because they have it. And it's been proven a success in our kind of social media culture. But there's that I guess there's that other side of it that is I want the stuff that I don't see people wearing. Like I appreciate it more because I'm going to be the first.
So when you're working with influencers, and I haven't worked with influencers a lot, what are some basic playbooks that you use?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, at the start of the influencer culture, which I don't know, it was like 7, 8 years ago with, I guess, Instagram's or Facebook's acquisition of Instagram, and them putting, data behind all of this stuff that was just influencer content. It was very much based upon quantity of followers, and I guess they are visually like cool looking. And it's very surface level, right? So you look at the number of followers and you look at how they look. That was pretty much the basic strategy of things. I think as things have evolved and we understand that there's a more of a technological aspect to influencer marketing, then it becomes more than how many followers they have. It's really built upon, do they represent the brand image that we are trying to create long term? And also, what is the quality of their followers? Like, how active are they? How influential can this influencer be if they're not targeting the people that we want long term? It's again, like 8 years ago, it was very much a quick reward, and I think now we've evolved into what is that long term lifetime strategy of building our network and consumers.
So is influencer culture almost done, or do I still need to figure this out?
I don't think it's done. I think it's evolved. I think it's I think it isn't an easy playbook. I think that utilizing influencers definitely has its place, and like I said, people still want to feel validated. I think validating the normal person with the influencer strategy it takes a little bit more than, checking what their followers are. It's getting to know this person outside of the picture, that they're posting.
Well, during the pandemic, do you think that influencer culture has actually waned a bit and people are looking for something a little more solid?
Yeah, I think in retail, um, in general, the influencer culture, it wasn't as sexy and glamorous as it was before. Some of the top influencers and the top, and I'm talking celebrity on down to someone that has 100K followers in their social media channels. They were always able to kind of glamorize things in a way that was unachievable to most, and just this kind of North Star of how I want to look, how if you think about in the kind of interior design aspect or in technological aspect, these are the things that I want. And you're showing it in a way that might make me feel like that. Like, I think that's what it is, chasing that feeling. Um, Influencers in the pandemic culture is much more, I can relate to what you are doing. Like, they're in the same place as I am. So I think that we've been able to connect with them more. I don't think that it's waned and we want something more real. I think we actually got something more real through this.
Before the pandemic, I'd always see photos of you, or you'd send a short video and you're on set somewhere. You're somewhere in America on set. And today, when I talk to you, you're always in your living room.
Yeah.
And how are you still creating content remotely?
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a question that I'm still dealing with. We've been in my living room for what, 7 months now, 8 months, and it's kind of a good evolution of how I got here. I was on set maybe 2-3 times in LA shooting some content, and I got off the plane here in Denver and made my way up to the office and uh, was told to turn right back around and go home. It was the very start of the uh, I guess the pandemic. COVID wasn't new, but it was the time when everyone realized what was happening. And I started that post production work right here in my living room. So now, how are we creating things now? It's been a constant evolution. I mean, we started we didn't know all the details. We didn't know how airborne or not airborne this thing was. We didn't know what the safety precautions were, what good masks to wear. So we actually had a shoot a week after. And it was on location still, but here in Denver. So we flew everyone in to do this. And, that was an okay thing to do at that point because there wasn't much info. And then after that, we, keeping our ear to the ground, we understood how dangerous this thing was.
I remember seeing that shoot and thinking there's some risk involved in this shoot. Like maybe I spend more time poring over, what's the latest medical knowledge on COVID.
And I think, you being where you are, you kind of felt all that before we did. I think, the Seattle Pacific Northwest in general was hit earliest.
That makes sense. It was on my radar early.
Yeah. Along with the LAs and New Yorks, but
you are in a high risk group.
Yeah.
So working from home is a smart idea for you.
Absolutely. And, taking advantage of all the knowledge that I could get about, I guess, what this virus can do. It was very, I might have been late to the game, but I took it very seriously in moving forward. And, after that shoot, we kind of learned we are probably going to be in this situation longer than the time it is for our next shoot to happen. So we just got to start planning. And for myself, as high risk to if I was infected, it would probably be a couple days at the hospital in ICU. But that kind of gave everyone the sense of like, we shouldn't be thinking about ourselves. We need to be thinking about other people, at least in the inner circle that I'm working with. So
it's worth probably for people listening to know that I'm not sure how long it's been, but you worked through colon cancer over probably the last year and a half.
Yep.
And I know there was a physical toll and there's a mental toll. And then to have something like this happening, which is a threat. I wanted to ask you, in working through something like that, how do you stay creative and how do you balance that professionally?
Oh, wow. So, I mean, I actually haven't like talked about this much. So, I was diagnosed with at stage 3 um, colorectal cancer in September of 18, and kind of did a few rounds of radiation, a couple rounds of chemo, and during that time, I had to take a break. Like I actually couldn't function creatively going through that. I think it was something smart I did. It was something that I needed to focus on myself. And I think that there are many times in your career that you kind of have these things, or you kind of just need that little sabbatical. Unfortunately for me, it was kind of a shitty sabbatical that I needed to take. And I think that time spent um, in radiation and chemo and coming off into physical therapy was very much reflective of like, what am I doing and what is the impact I'm making? And since then, I've been in remission for almost 2 years now. I yeah, yeah, I know.
Good.
It is good. Yeah, yeah. When I check
I
in with
hadn't asked you that question specifically, so
yeah. I mean, it's still a struggle. I mean, the impact that chemotherapy and radiation have long term, it doesn't leave, and it's something that I never educated myself on when I went into it. I still would have made the decision to go through all of this, but I wasn't prepared for the lasting impact that it has. And it's little things like I have like digestive issues, so it just kind of hurts. It's a chronic pain. I get sweaty sometimes, or I get just a little like fatigued through all this. And after consulting with doctors, I guess that's a normal thing when you go through that harsh of a chemo and radiation, and it'll probably never leave. But I've worked with that and really like figured out how can I be the kind of hands-on creative that I am, traveling, being on set, being very hands-on and managing art directors and designers and copywriters and be there for other people. But also how am I there for myself? So I think, while it's something that I don't really share with people, I do let people know that are important, that I need to take a break sometimes and I need to like step away to kind of deal with my like physical issues and mental sometimes too. Like it's draining to kind of keep up and expect myself to be able to do the work at the pace that I used to before, the illness. And it's a little hindering sometimes because my mind wants to move fast. But physically, I'm a little slower, and it takes me longer to process things sometimes. But I think that it's given me perspective, and in my younger career, I was very reactive and very like emotional driven with things. Like I was lucky that I had good intuition, so a lot of the times when I'd react, it would more often than not be a good solve. But I've learned, in the past few years that how to slow down a bit and think about things. And I think that's one of the gifts, if anything, that something like a cancer can give you is perspective and the ability to slow down.
Do you think that's impacted the type of creative choices that you make now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that things are much more thoughtful. I think the choices that I make because of illness is very much it isn't I guess about my perspective anymore. Like I mentioned earlier, that I have good intuition. That might be luck, or it could be experience, but it's not something that I think has been great long term. And being able to take it slower and take a step back and make decisions more methodical and more, I guess, less emotional has been, the changing factor, but also a good factor.
I'd actually like to back up. And one thing I never really asked you about is your origin story, where you grew up, how you decided to become a creative, and the idea that now you're feeling more methodical. It would be interesting to hear about your arc and how you got where you're at.
Yeah, yeah. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I spent a little time in Orange County, so it's always been Southern California until I was about 19 when I started to make some moves. But I was always interested in the creative space, but it wasn't something that was like nurtured in me in grade school or high school. I was very much into like I guess I still have the hope that I'll make the NBA one day, but I've been kind of relegated to the bench, the far bench 13th spot to, I wrote on walls a lot. Graffiti was a big culture that I was in high school. And, I was put in handcuffs a few times. And I got a push from my parents that was like, you should probably try to do something with this. So yeah, I took art classes in high school, but it was nothing that I was like really into or interested in.
So street art was an early seed for you.
Yeah, I growing up in LA, it was very much the hip hop culture and very much uh, ingrained in me in the 80s and 90s. So after a few run-ins and hiccups with the law, my parents supported kind of what I was doing, and they helped pay for just a trade school for me. So I took a couple classes and then realized, okay, graphic design is kind of cool. It's not as exciting as I wanted it to be, but I did a couple years of that and got an associate's and was just like, all right, I was never really into school. So I was like, all right, let's just take this thing and see where I can get. I bounced around and did some contract work for publishing companies, magazines, and like myspace.com, which was, huge in LA at that time. And I learned that I wasn't great at it, and I wasn't, I guess, as thoughtful at it that I wanted to be. I always thought that like making pretty pictures was pretty much like the field of graphic design, but then as I wasn't really getting anywhere with it, I actually thought about like what can take me to the next step, and I enrolled and was accepted into an art school in London, and I didn't have a passport prior to that. I've been to Mexico and Canada a couple of times, but back then you didn't need a passport. And so this was my first time like going to a real school, going to Europe, going across a pond, and I kind of ingrained myself in that culture. So I studied advertising.
How old were you?
I was 24 when I went back to school.
24 when you went back to school and you studied advertising in London.
Yeah. Yep. And that was, I guess, when I really started becoming interested in all aspects of the creative and marketing space, was that, the only things I could focus on were really school when I went out there. And, I was an older student than most. So, I mean, it doesn't mean I was more mature, but it meant that I needed to take advantage of this opportunity, because I know that I kind of like let the previous opportunity go. I just wasn't into it enough. So I found passion in learning about different cultures, and I found passion in learning about creating, artwork through storytelling. And I think that was the difference between what I was as a graphic designer and what I was as a creative. As a graphic designer, it was, how can I make this look pretty? I didn't understand what subjectivity was. I would be very defensive when I thought it looked good, but it didn't meet a strategy. And, whatever path you take, you kind of learn that that's not how it's going to be in this world. When I took advantage of this advertising degree opportunity, I learned all aspects and facets of marketing and advertising, from what a project manager does to what terms to call out during a commercial shoot. Like, it was it was very much different from, I guess, the American college experience, where you kind of take some general education classes and you're always going to kind of have a mixed bag of things that you take along with your major. Getting a bachelor's in the UK was very much, you're very focused on what your craft is, and similar to what a trade school is, but very much more in detail, and very much ingrained into the history and future of this field.
I find that I got more from technical classes I took once I was a professional than I did as an undergrad. And it could be that just the precision of terminology was useful. I've taken 10 or 15 classes at the School of Visual Concepts here in Seattle, and I've taken a few from General Assembly, and just using the correct term at the correct moment. It's sort of, I don't know, it'll get you a little bit more respect in the conversation versus don't make it so bright. And in terms, I'm thinking of what's the hierarchy of what I'm looking at here and what's most important, and being able to describe things to people in a way that they can go and solve it. But I just have this goal that needs to be achieved.
Yeah. The communication aspect of it is huge. And, I think that's something that I brought back with me was, when I came back to the States in 2009, I kind of went back into the design world, but it was much more focused on strategic aspects of design. Being in the digital space, I think that as a creative, you have to learn the channel you're working in, and you have to understand that it's far beyond, does this look nice? Is this working? And I spent some time in the agency side, and we spent some time together at Responses, and it was, our time there was very much about, like, we understood the tools and the analytics and the metrics that came back, which helped us understand what the consumer, how their behavior was, and we would adjust creative accordingly.
So I found that being a creative there made you as methodical as anywhere, or as, what's the term I'm looking for? Sometimes I felt like those pieces that we would make for companies were algebra equations, in which I knew the audience. I had a sense of the moment in time we were going to speak to them, and I could infer roughly what the tone and the message needed to be. And then you could see how it did, It felt like throwing darts sometimes, and I needed a 17. So I got to throw a 17 for this thing to work.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, it's exactly how I thought of it. It was, I think that as we were, working through, it was, primarily email, but it was, aspects of social and web were in there, and everything was kind of interconnected in this like life cycle journey that we'd create. And it became less about the visual and more about, like, are we creating the right visual for this moment in time? And I think you put it perfectly. It became algebra, and that was something that I was interested in, was becoming, not just being thoughtful in the work, but seeing return. Like, I could see if it worked. You don't get that a lot from the like commercial advertising or even like print. It was more about the brand image than it was about like making things work and profitable.
There's a very rigid discipline in which you're interpreting somebody else's brand to a moment on the customer journey. I think I've taken that and have applied it to many things that I've done since then. Everything I'm making, I'm just thinking in terms of what's the return on this. And however, you can get so far into a game like that you no longer become audacious and you no longer swing for the fences. And you need to stop and be like, okay, well, how would we actually make this spectacular? And we need to give that a shot.
Yeah. And I mean, to continue on that origin story, it's part of the reason I left, was that I wanted to experience something that I was swinging for the fences on. I think I got into too much of a mode of learning how to solve the problem as prescribed, and forgetting that creatives should be creative. They should be pulled back. They should be doing things that make people uncomfortable sometimes. And, I think that the creative experience that Responsus gave me gave me a disciplined look at how to compromise creative for metrics and performance. But then I forgot that, making something really, really cool can negate all of that other stuff. Because sometimes just making cool stuff is okay.
Like you can sell shoes, but you can also win hearts. You don't always do it at the exact same moment, but you need to be thinking about both as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are those like buildups for strengthening a brand, right? So performance marketing is very much based in the let's do this the right way. Here's the formula. But you have to think about that long-term piece of it. And I wanted that opportunity to really see how far I could stretch myself. So after Responses, I just kind of dabbled in the things that I was interested in. I think that, this day and age, you don't stay at a place for 50 years and get your gold watch. I think especially in the creative field, it's kind of expected that you're going to bounce around a couple times and experience new things, because people bring in creatives with breadths of experience. They, marketing teams like to bring in creative leadership that has worked in different areas, not just a competitive set, but bringing a mindset of experience and brand knowledge. And, I think from the brand perspective, we were able to do that agency side because you work with such diverse group of brands. But, for a few years, I was dabbling and just experiencing as much as I could in the agency world. So I took that, and I think I figured out, I think I belong on the brand side of things, and I want to take all of this experience. And my last run at the agency world was kind of my own thing. And I had, I had a few clients and a couple designers and traditional and some UX folks, and we were just kind of doing projects. And then, I wanted to experience the brand side of things. So I had an opportunity to go over to PetSmart and talk about a big retailer. I mean, it's pet culture in the States is very much like they're one of our kids. So this, being able to drive storytelling and communication for that brand was much more than selling dog food. It was really telling an emotional connection. So that's what I craved. I really wanted to do some more storytelling and kind of build that part of my portfolio.
As a creative, you have great power in the way stories are told and the way people and products are portrayed in advertising. And have you discussed this with your team? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly the things that I make sure that everyone knows, from down to an associate designer all the way up to my art directors, is that we have a marketing team that helps with the strategy and helps define our position in the market. But we're responsible, and we are, as creatives, we hold the keys to the brand visually, and through voice and tone, through the energy. And we're the last stop in that. Obviously there's reviews and people look at it, but we're the ones kind of taking that strategy and kind of dissecting it and then rebuilding it to show.
I think even in society, though, you have great power in the way things are portrayed.
Yeah, I mean, personally, or just as a human.
Well, consider that. Here's a stat. AIGA reports that only 3% of all designers are Black.
Yeah.
And so design is a very white crowd.
Yeah.
And thinking in terms of, if you have a group that's not profoundly diverse, what's their point of view and how are they going to portray things? And so in my mind, I've been chewing on this recently, there's likely large groups, well, it's not likely, we know there's large groups left out of the conversation of the way people and products are portrayed in the media. And here's what your thoughts are on this, in that you create things on a day-to-day basis that get in front of a lot of eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't talk about like brand experience specific, but I think that through my entire career, I've seen a lot of diversity when it comes to creatives at the design or copy level. And then as I started to grow my own career, um, you know, becoming an art director, becoming a creative director, becoming, an owner of my own business, I, looked around the room and I was slowly, the faces were slowly starting to disappear in terms of diversity. And, I can look into a room or meeting now and I can be the only person of color there. And I can look across and see that there's maybe one woman in a group of 10. So I, I think that through my career, I've always adapted myself to what other people see and think. And, I think something that came out of some of the social injustice that is happening right now is I think white people are understanding that they aren't the ones to define what perspective is. I think that it's become much more clear and open that other people think differently. Other people are, I guess, just as much part of the conversation, even if they aren't in that room. And being able to execute on that, it has been, I think it's been slow for a lot. I've been lucky to be in a position now where I'm very much ingrained in the culture and it's kind of inherent in the things that I do. But I think now there's less of a lens of is this appropriate or not, and more so of this needs to happen.
How do you define this? What is this that needs to happen?
Change. I think change in how we create, change in who are the creators. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I don't, I don't know why all this stuff has happened so recently that has shed light on how little representation, minorities and oppressed people have had in marketing and creative, and I think about kind of my time in the agency world. And, I was a part of an agency that was partners with an agency that focused on minority marketing. And, I thought that was kind of normal. And, now that I look back on that, I think we should all be very aware and there shouldn't be this like separate, segregated strategy. I think that things that come out of communication and copy and visuals should be representative of, like I said, the kind of the people in the room creating and the people that are consuming these creations.
Is this something you think about a lot? Is this always in the back of your mind?
More recently than not, and yeah, I mean, I think I kind of just evolved with this um, kind of white culture that defines what good creative is. So I was thinking in that mindset too.
Now, this is interesting. Describe this to me.
Um, it's very inclusive to be inclusive, because not because they feel it's right, but because it is what is politically correct. There is a lot of hesitation, and there is a lot of white people talking to white people about what is appropriate for other cultures. And it's been pretty eye-opening for me because I was that person in the room that could have said, here's my perspective on things. But instead, I was kind of part of that conversation of um, rationalizing and, creating this safe space because it was politically correct. There wasn't, I guess it's not challenging each other to think.
It's not your responsibility in life to fix people. and you're trying to do the gig.
Yeah.
But do you have any irritation with yourself that you didn't do that? And we can always look back and be like, in that moment, I should have said this. But
yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. It's not my job to fix people, but I think my regret is it is my responsibility to kind of stand up for the things that I believe in, and stand up for a representation of those that are marginalized, and not be part of the problem. I guess is kind of what my regret is that I was part of the problem, and but that's given me more energy and more thought into how I'm going to be part of the solution. You're right. It's not my job to fix flawed people, but it is my responsibility to kind of fight for those that don't have a voice.
The idea of normalizing the conversation, and that's a term that you've used, as in just make it more of a regular part of the conversation. And I'd say since George Floyd died and the protests were all over America, people who I'm close to, who are people of color, have begun telling stories. And I've just sort of begun reading stories. And one day on Instagram, you, who are one of the most private people I've ever met, me, I'm one of the more private people I've ever met, and you're like 2x private over me on your on your most open day. And you posted a story about how as a kid you lived in one neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to you that you're a person of color. And then at some point in your life, your family moved across town.
Yeah.
And suddenly it became very apparent.
Yep.
And I didn't go through that, obviously. But I knew that it was important to you for you have to taken the time to write that out and for other people to read it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess we haven't talked about that and in our personal conversations, and you're exactly right. I'm a very private person. I keep things close, and is a lot of these things have been happening in social injustice and racial issues. It's been going on for a long time, but as they've been brought to light more recently, I just felt that I needed to do something that was uncomfortable for me, but kind of freeing in a way, because I couldn't take that step to be a voice for people professionally. I couldn't be a voice for those, in my everyday life. Whether you're part of the LGBT community or a woman or or the color of your skin, I just couldn't be that voice until I kind of freed myself from, I guess, the weight that was on my shoulders of I was always part of the problem, but this is why I was. And, since then, since I was able to express a lot of the things that I went through personally and the things that shaped me, I've been able to think clearly about how I create and how I think. And it's been, while it made me uncomfortable, it made me stronger, I think, and it gave me a sense of like purpose. So, telling my story was just a piece of it. And I think that what I really got out of it was the conversation and normalizing the conversation, being able to speak with you about it. And while you didn't go through it yourself, you were able to kind of live through my eyes in a quick, like 2-minute read.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. I actually did. When I was reading, I was like, I'm glad he told this story.
Yeah. And, I think that in the normalization of things, no matter who you are, you have a story to tell. And, we don't have to wait for something bad to happen for us to tell that story. And, while I did wait for something really bad to happen to tell that story, I hope that it opened other people's eyes to, tell me about your experiences. Tell me how this makes you feel. And that goes beyond just a friendly conversation. And that goes into the marketing boardroom of we're making these decisions and how does it make you feel? Because you are like, the second that you hang it up for the day and you head home at 5 or whatever, you become a person again. And how does that make you feel? So, I think that's something that we can all gain from this, and how we can integrate it into our day-to-day work is remember there are things that you can compartmentalize, but there's things that, like you said, we have a voice for a lot of people, and we have an impact, and we have a really cool opportunity to tell these stories as marketers and creatives, and we hold the keys to that. So, while we can't, do it immediately tomorrow, what are you doing today to make that step?
So for the third and final extremely personal topic that I'm going to talk to Michael Ryan Wilson today, congratulations on getting married.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, a private event that I barely told anyone about.
But that I saw on the front page of Reddit.
Yes. We made it to the front page of Reddit. That was, a crowning achievement. And I don't
want to describe that.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do we describe that? So, let's start with the beginning of the story. So, my wife and I, we were planning on getting married here in Colorado, and because of COVID, we couldn't have all our family and friends flying in. It was just,
I was going to be there, and we were going to have cake, and yet here I am in Seattle, and you got married, but I haven't had any cake.
I promised you some whiskey and cake, but we're gonna.
That's my complaint.
We're gonna do it. So I mean, we weren't able to do it, so we decided to elope. All safety precautions and all testing, and practically wearing a bubble suit all the way to our destination. But one of the places that took us in was Sandals, Jamaica. So we went down to Negril, and at the Sandals Resort, decided to recreate a photo of Michael Scott and Jan Levinson Gould.
Jan Levinson.
And
no more Gould.
Just no more Gould. And I mean, it was pretty spot on. Reddit's a great community that loves to call out all the things that were wrong with the picture that wasn't accurate, but it was enough people that were like, okay, that was pretty good, to give us enough karma to get to the front page. So, I don't know where I put that on my LinkedIn. A credit due to my wife, and a great concept, and succeeded.
Yeah, congratulations all around.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today on Input Doc. It was a real pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah. I hope I didn't go in too many circles. That's what the editing button's for, right? So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I made lots of notes. Just kidding.
Yeah.
That was great. Thanks. I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, of course. Input
Doc is produced by Megan O'Neill, edited by Lily Chu. The music you're listening to is an original creation by our very own Brian Leahy. We'd also like to thank our project manager, Scott Greger, who does all the work at the agency while we make this podcast. I'm your host, Tim Yaden. Have a great day.